We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Well, welcome to the Sunday night edition of my new show, or my old show, which is my new show, which was originally my old show. Because when I started to do this, I started it off on Sunday nights, and then I switched it to Friday day. I had the interview show on Sunday night, and then I changed it to Friday day. And that's gone on for about a year and a half, and now it's back on Sunday night. So it's the new, old, new show. Can you dig it? Mars is retrograde, so maybe that might have something to do with it. My name is Robert Phoenix. This is Free Association Sundays, and I am not joined by anybody tonight, unfortunately. I'm just getting this new time slot ramped up, so I have to start clearing my guests for Sunday night, which is in some ways a little trickier than Friday day. Friday day, people are up and about, they're doing things. Not impossible to get somebody here on Sunday night, but it's a little trickier. So I'm not sure how long I'm going to go on for tonight, but I needed to plant the flag and be here tonight and talk about some stuff. Or things, important things, I'm sure, for you. I know they're important for me. So I thought to myself, well, what am I going to talk about? Well, why don't we start with the news cycle? The news cycle is always it's a convenient thing to tap into, and, people want to talk about the news. Most of the time they do, especially if something out there is low-hanging fruit. And let's face it, this Rush Limbaugh thing is low-hanging fruit. I just got back into Facebook, and I'm getting my feet back on the ground there again. And I'm trying not to do it too much because, I have a semi-addictive personality when it comes to these things, which is one of the reasons why I got off Facebook before. The other reason was I was getting into a lot of conflicts and spending a lot of time trying to prove points, trying to be fair, trying to do all the stuff that philosophically I'm in agreement with. But it was just draining me, and I felt like I needed to put my energy in other places. And I have. And now that I feel like I've got a little more balance back in my life, I can go back in there. So today I got in there, and I got into it with somebody. And I put up a post about Rush Limbaugh. Okay, first of all, I am not a defender of Rush Limbaugh. So let's get that out in the open. I don't listen to Rush Limbaugh. I've tried. I find his type of politics to be absolutely polarizing. Now, some people might find my politics polarizing as well, but perhaps for different reasons. But I find his politics polarizing without any kind of resolution. Now, I'm open to polarization with resolution, but I found it to be polarizing, and I found it to be something that, I mean, here, let's be right up front. Rush Limbaugh still thinks terrorists did 9/11. Okay, that automatically excludes him from any serious discussion that I could have, because he's defending a point of view which enabled the Patriot Act to be initiated, and not one, but two wars, in, of course, the name of democracy, to be started. 3 if you count Pakistan. This is why I can't take Rush Limbaugh seriously, and I can't defend him. Not defensible at all. That's aside from how he feels about women, or what he says about women, what he said about Sarah Fluke, which is indefensible. I mean, he was going after his ratings. We all know that. He was appealing to his listenership who thought it would be fun to take a poke at this woman. And he made a bad career move. He's already had 7 sponsors jump ship because people are very organized, and they're making him pay a price for this. But I think it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong message to send in some ways, because to me, and this is what I put on Facebook, to me it is like taking a howitzer at an apple that has a worm in it that's about 5 feet off the ground or 6 feet off the ground. This is what I find fascinating about Facebook, is this group mind. It's this hive mind. You know, it's like and I wrote a blog post on Friday night, Saturday morning, and I wrote about this. And my contention around this Limbaugh thing. So look, it's not free speech is not free. There is a price to pay for speaking your mind. Whether speaking your mind is, filled with wisdom and true, or whether it's reactionary rhetoric, you can theoretically speak your mind still. But there's a price to pay for that. It's a big price to pay. For somebody like Andrew Breitbart, maybe the price to pay was his life. For somebody like Rush Limbaugh, maybe the price to pay is his professional life. So we can speak freely, but it is not free, especially in a world that is tied to commercial goods or commercial support. Alex Jones, one of the things that Alex Jones does is he stays away from criticizing Israel. Totally stays away from it. Alex Jones will blame everything on the Jesuits, or he'll blame everything on the Vatican, or he'll blame everything on some agency within the government, CIA, NSA, you name it. He'll go there. He won't blame Israel, and he certainly won't talk about Zionism at all. He won't go there. He's clear on that. And if he's not clear on it, his sidekick, Jason Burns, is. So Jones knows where his bread is buttered. Go up and down, look at his list of sponsors. Let's go ahead and look at his list of sponsors sometimes. All his sponsors have pretty close ties to Israel. So does that make Alex Jones a gatekeeper? I think it does. And if you have any kind of complaint against Israel or Zionism, especially on his message board, your message will get erased. So he knows where his bagel is buttered. Sorry, That was pointed, wasn't it? No, it's true, though. It's true. There's also some rumors that I found a site the other night that it's very closely aligned with a group called Stratfor, Stratfor, Stratfor. They are an Israeli intelligence gathering agency based out of Austin, Texas, and the web design around Stratfor and its goals and stuff like that they're very closely linked to Jones's website in terms of theme. So is he a front for Israeli intelligence? He might be, which is probably why he doesn't go hard after Israel. I mean, I was watching an interview he had with Ed Asner, who was Jewish, and Ed Asner was, he was out front on Iran, and he was out front on 9/11. He was saying this doesn't smell right, and and that there's going to be a false flag. And Ed Asner was actually, pointing his finger at Israel, and he was saying that Navy SEALs that he knew were going to that there was going to be a false flag. And when he said this, and Ed Asner, this is a guy who is a union guy and has been a really hardcore social progressive for years. He came out and said that, we should cut off Israel's money. This is what Ed Asner said. These are not my words, his. And Alex Jones quickly moved the conversation away from that. Quickly. He's deft, extremely deft. So, look, Alex Jones really is the Rush Limbaugh. So now it turns into Alex Jones. Alex Jones is the Rush Limbaugh for the quote-unquote truth movement, which is falling apart at the seams, by the way. The truth movement is falling apart at the seams. There is fratricide happening inside the truth movement. It's interesting. Now there's rumors and rumors of rumors and all the speculation, innuendo, what's going on with Macau and Rents, Ike, Paul Drockton, Louis Torrey, all these guys. Even my buddy Les Visible has gotten dragged into this because he supports Jeff. Now, I've never had an email returned to me by Jeff Renz, ever. And to his credit, Henry has returned my emails. He's linked to a couple of my pieces. I've had him on my show. He's taciturn. I've asked him to come on. He hasn't come on. He can be feisty. And I don't agree with everything that Henry posts either. I mean, he clearly seems to be going after the libertarians because he knows that gets into Jeff's craw. I know that's why he's doing that. But he's going after the libertarians. He's going after the Ron Paulites. He's going after, sort of that ilk. And he certainly has gone after David Icke. Icke, by the way, is another sacred cow that you can't really approach. I had a piece, one of the few pieces I've taken down on my site. I took down a piece that was critical of David Icke, critical of Jeff Renz, critical of Julian Assange. It's critical. And in Jones, the Alex Jones people came after me. Well, a few of them. And when I say people, I'm not talking about his company or anything, but people that listen to his show. And they were saying, no, you're just pissed because you don't have the same kind of ratings or popularity that Alex Jones does. Maybe I am. I'm not above that. Maybe I was pissed. Maybe I was frustrated. But at the same time, I don't think that could preclude any kind of valid criticism about Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones, and I used to listen to Alex a long time ago. When I say a long time, I'm talking about 2000, 2001. I haven't listened to him for years, although I will catch an interview he does every now and then. The thing about Alex Jones is that he whips people up into this frenzy. And he gets people angry, and he doesn't give them any kind of outlet. This piece that I saw about him, the Stratfor, Stratfor, FOR, Stratfor, the Stratfor group. You can look it up online. One of the things that the author of the piece, which is quite well researched and edited, said was that Jones is the commander of the United States' largest posse, or the largest, patriot group, the largest militia. He's got a point. I mean, Alex Jones has a lot of power. A lot of power. And he's good at whipping people up. He's good at appealing to their third chakra. He's good at accessing their fifth chakra. That's what he does. He's a fifth chakra guy. He's good at using his voice. But he gets people to tap into their third chakra and their first chakra, which is survival. He links the three of them up and gets them fired up. But he doesn't take them anywhere. And maybe that's not his job. Now, some people say, well, you get the truth where you can. You've got to separate the wheat from the chaff. You got to pan for gold. Well, there's some truth to that as well, but not everybody can be that selective, or not everybody can be that discerning. I know people in my chat room that, they're sharp as tacks, and they get it. They sift through things, but not everybody does. When some people, first get a taste of the truth, it's like, it's whoever turns you on initially, right? It's generally, who you're going to go to for continued sustenance or support or information. So if you get turned out by Alex Jones on the truth tip, you're probably going to go back to Jones. If you get turned out by whoever, my awakening was evolutionary, and Bill Cooper actually played a pretty big role in it back in the early 90s. I knew about Bill Cooper when hardly anybody else did. That's my claim to fame. I knew Bill Cooper way back in 1989, 1990. Alex Jones theoretically was still in high school then, maybe even junior high. But anyway, that's beside the point. But people aren't always discerning. So they just take into account that whatever somebody's saying is the gospel. And you can find stuff on Jones that is very relevant. If you can, A, block off the assault, or not the assault, the cording of your third chakra and your first chakra, if you can shut that down and sift through some of the information, there's some good stuff there. There are some good things on Jeff Rentz's site. There's some terrible things on his site. Jeff kind of has a shotgun blast of links, some of which are good, some of which are not so good. But you can find some stuff there. You can kind of go through it and sort out the rest. But again, this is a proactive search. This is a proactive winnowing through influences. Anyway, I was here to talk about Rush Limbaugh, and I got off on Alex Jones because I think they're very similar. And I think that they're gatekeepers. And Rush Limbaugh is a gatekeeper for people that are to the, I wouldn't say to the right or to the left of Alex Jones, maybe to the north of Alex Jones. That's what he's there to do. He's there to give them the experience of something that's real. He's there to create a community. He's there to voice things that other people in a society that has been constrained by the manacles of politically correct thought and speech. He is that guy that gets away with saying those things. That's why they listen to him. And he confirms all these things that they're running around with and have really very few avenues to share with other people. Maybe they share with their friends, I don't know. But he's created this culture of ditto heads. And that's why he's popular, because he speaks to things that people are thinking but can't always say. Now, he crossed the line with Sarah Fluke when he called her a slut around this whole birth control and contraception thing. And it may cost him his career, at least at this level. I think he's got way too many numbers, ultimately. But clearly, this has been a victory for the Obama administration, which I think pandered to Sarah Fluke in some ways. Pandered to her. Oh, let's call her up. Oh, is she okay? Oh, I'm with you. I support you. You poor thing. No, it's not right. What he did was not right. He shouldn't have done it. Should not have done it. Bottom line. But here is the problem. And this is maybe what I, want to circle around and talk about tonight. That is the political correctness of thought and speech and the subversive and often covert programming that goes into shaping our thoughts from a very early age, so that we go through life ultimately afraid to have an original thought or an original or a stance that stands out from the mainstream. And this is symbolic of the hive mind, it's a manifestation of the hive mind. Today on Facebook, I threw out this other thing today about the difference between the hive mind or the collectivist mind and the individual mind. I was listening to Coast to Coast last night, and Foster Gamble was on. And Foster Gamble, of course, is the director of Thrive, the guy who put all the money into Thrive. I actually liked the interview. I thought John Wells did a pretty good job in the interview. They allowed calls to come in, which was great. I wish he'd done that with Susan Linderman. So this one guy got on there. This is kind of what sparked this in my head today. This one guy got on there and he asked Foster Gamble about what he thought about a resource-based economy. Now, I knew what he was talking about. John Wells may not have known what he was talking about. Gamble knew what he was talking about. He was referring to zeitgeist, and he was referring to the Venus Project, and he was referring to Jacques Fresco, and this whole idea of, and the thrust of zeitgeist is the elimination of money. The elimination of money. The zeitgeist movement is a collectivist movement. At its core, zeitgeist is socialism with lipstick. It's what it is. It is socialism with a lipstick. Because when you get into the whole Venus Project, it's this science fiction fantasy of Metropolis, and instead of Metropolis being underground, it's above ground. Machines do everything. Now, look, I think that there's some truth to that. Machines can do a lot, and they can probably do a hell of a lot more than they're doing now in terms of automation and running things. I mean, they're trying to, turn the entire country into a grid-like machine with smart meters. That's the goal with smart meters. When you see those IBM commercials about a smart planet, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about the control grid. The control grid is based on smart meters and a bunch of other things that tie into it. So the Venus Project is the manifestation of the movie Metropolis, but it's above ground. And if you've ever seen the movie Metropolis, if you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. And it is an esoteric blueprint for the age that we are entering into, and have been in for quite a while, but really entering into. And in Metropolis, there's essentially two levels of society. There's a society that's above ground. They live in a life of luxury and leisure, and technology is the the mechanism that allows them to experience their godlike status on the planet. But meanwhile, it takes place at the expense and cost of lives beneath the surface of the planet that are running everything. And it's a brutal existence. And if you can't hold up your end of the bargain, meaning if you can't keep your machine running, you get evaporated. I mean, that's what it is. You get two choices. You get to live as a slave, or you get eviscerated and disintegrated. And that's the basic plot line for Metropolis. And there's a lot more too, which actually involves the occult, transhumanism. It's a brilliant film. But what the Venus Project is it's Metropolis extruded and manifested on the material plane. It is instead of a nightmare, it becomes a pipe dream. That's what the Venus Project becomes. And so you have people at that point now who are operating the machines, and it's all based on the resources of their time and effort and energy. So, for instance, if you are running X machine or Y machine, or maybe you're building a garden and integrating machine with that garden, all that stuff that goes towards your chits or your credits, and you accrue these, and then you turn them in or you use them for some form of dispensation or reward. That's how that works. It's resource based. So this guy asked Foster Gamble about well, how do you feel about a resource-based economy? He talked about zeitgeist. And it was really interesting because he said that they had learned a lot from zeitgeist, and they were very supportive of zeitgeist. And they believe in a lot of the same things that zeitgeist promotes, which I thought was, it's interesting. He spoke very warmly of zeitgeist, as a matter of fact. But then he made a distinct difference, and the distinct difference was that that the Thrive people, or the Thrive movement, still believes in money, and that money is a fair exchange. And he said that he didn't think that money was wrong or bad. It was the application of money that was wrong and bad. And of course, he got into ending the Fed, and libertarians, they love Thrive. They totally love Thrive. Constitutionalists love Thrive. And one of the things that Foster Gamble said that made sense to me was that he believed that all we really needed was the Declaration of Independence. That was really all we needed. And he said that the Constitution and that the Articles of Confederation were the enumeration of principles that began to truncate the experience of having freedom and rights. And that if we just lived off the Declaration of Independence, we'd probably be okay. And I thought that was actually a pretty interesting statement, to be honest with you. Anyway, long story short, they liked the zeitgeist. They liked the ideas and thought they were interesting. But there was a big divergence around resource-based versus money. Now, if you're in the zeitgeist world and you've got a resource-based economy, how are you going to keep track of that? You're going to need technology to do that. And what are you going to use? Are you going to use a debit card? Are you going to use an implantable chip? Because somebody's got to keep track of this stuff, right? Now the problem is, okay, so let's think about this for a second. A debit card is a debit card. Still tracks everything you buy, where you buy it, when you buy it. Lots of information can be garnered from a debit card. But the good thing about the debit card is, theoretically, is you can leave the debit card at home and you have an option to use cash. Although now, if you use cash, you can be branded a terrorist, apparently. If you have a chip, that's a whole different thing. It's a whole different ballgame. And we all know about the chip. In fact, somebody asked Foster Gamble, if the chip comes, are you going to take the chip? And his whole thing was, well, we're going to do everything in our power to not get there. And ultimately, the answer would be no. That's a big question, big question. Are we going to get to that point? Do we even need to get to that point at this point? I mean, if you follow some of the more outlandish, I don't want to say outlandish, more outrageous and out there, and in my estimation, still probable concepts around Morgellons and nano arrays and all this other stuff, they don't even need a chip anymore. That it's all in us already. That we are literally walking around as walking, talking, breathing RFID transmitters 24/7. That's happening right now. So we don't even really need a chip, theoretically. But they may want it just for cosmetic purposes and control purposes. I mean, think about that. So anyway, I began to think about this whole idea of socialism or collectivism. And if you look at zeitgeist and start stripping stuff away, it really is just kind of a new age socialism. I mean, one of the things that they do in zeitgeist, and it's a big part of zeitgeist, is they kill Christ. They just, that's a big thing. Religion has fucked everything up. And, it's not Eastern religion. They don't really go after the Buddha. They don't really go after Allah. They don't go after Nomo or Quetzalcoatl, but they do go after Jesus, and they go after Jesus hard. And they use a lot of our Chira S as material, and so they take a big broadside at religion and then wipe it away. Well, what is the first thing that socialism and Bolshevism did? They took away religion. So what's separating zeitgeist from the Trotskyites and the Bolsheviks? Nothing. The Bolsheviks, nothing. Really, nothing. Maybe a different sense of decorum. And maybe they would sit around and allow you to, contemplate your navel, as long as it wasn't about Jesus, because Jesus doesn't exist. It's a big lie. So there's that. I mean, they have that in common. It's a very big piece. You take that away, well, then what? And then there's no money, right? I mean, and it's this collectivist movement. And it sounds good. I thought zeitgeist was really cool. When I first got into it, it's like, oh, wow, this is cool. I like it. Even the Venus Project sounded interesting. I mean, we need stuff. We need visionary models. I'm not denouncing a visionary model. We need that stuff. It's important. But it's also important to understand kind of what the nuts and bolts are, who's behind it, and why they're pushing it. Because not everything is a utopian dream. It's just not. So then I thought about, okay, well, that's collectivist. And then the zeitgeist, the Thrive movement is about individuality. Right? It's the individual, it's determinate to who they are, where they want to go. It's the American dream circa 1839, right? That's what Thrive is. Thrive appeals to the individual mindsets. And the individual mindset, of course, would be into things like free energy and all that stuff, ultimately. So now here you have these two different models, right? And if you really break them down even further, the collectivist model is an urban model. It's an urban model. It is not a rural or natural model. You may think that, well, what about communes and farms and kibbutzes and stuff like that, which are in some ways very socialist? Those are only adjuncts of the state, generally speaking. It is an urbanized, citified model, whereas the individual-based model of Thrive is more rural or more natural because, one, they're into property rights and owning property, and the individual has the right to own property. that's really at the core of, still at the core of Thrive and of the, which is really libertarianism. It's sort of like spiritual techno-libertarianism. And in the zeitgeist world, that's not really the case. I don't think people own property in the zeitgeist or the collectivized world. Property is either owned by the states, which theoretically is the people, or it's owned by the collective, but it's not about individual property rights. And what's going on right now is with the advance of Agenda 21 and everything that's coming through the UN right now. Here's a little clicks. People do listen to me on this show. What we're seeing is a concentration of this ideology being played out all across America at a local level through city councils and something called ICLE, and creating these population centers or population zones. This is all collectivist, and this is where all this is headed. This is, and even Alex Jones talked about this, and to his credit, the whole idea, and I've talked about it before, is to create an America where population is concentrated, nobody really owns anything, travel in cars, it's prohibitive, and if you want to go somewhere and you do have a car, you're on a highway and you can't get off that highway until you get to the next urban center. You may be able to pull off and take a pee and eat a soy burger or something like that, but you won't be able to get out of your car and go down the lake and stick your pole in the lake, go fishing. It won't be allowed. This is part of the collectivist movement, and we are in a collectivist cycle. I mean, theoretically, we're in the Aquarian age, or we're getting close to the Aquarian age. We're still, I mean, if you get into the math, it's still a ways off, but, if we look at the symbols of the Aquarian age, they're front and center and have been for a while. The end or the death of the Piscean age, which I talked about with the crash of the Concordia. And to me, the Super Bowl ritual with Madonna is yet another active pageant, or a sense of it's an activation of pageantry that celebrates and promotes the dark version of the Aquarian age. And of course, you have your ritual sacrifice with the Leo sun, which is Whitney Houston. But anyway, this is where we are theoretically, right? I mean, the Aquarian age is a collectivist age, really, if you think about it. But there's a difference, because you can have a collectivist zeitgeist, for lack of a better term, or spirit, but it can be arrived at a very different way. I mean, the way to go about it, in my estimation, would be to have individuated people that know who they are, that have the ability to make decisions, and not only have the ability, but have the social approval of being able to make decisions on their own, which means less government, less interference, so that they have the freedom to actually choose. And I just heard a story about a week ago. I think it was last week. I think it was in North Carolina, Florida, where a girl who had her lunch prepared by her grandmother, she had her lunch taken from her because the school deemed that it was not nutritious enough. And I heard the ingredients for lunch. She had an apple. She had a turkey sandwich with whole wheat bread. It did not sound that unhealthy. And yet the school took it under, the school decided, somebody in the lunchroom decided that that wasn't going to be nutritious enough. This is what I'm talking about. And we're seeing more and more of these things begin to put into place. And they're beginning to condition people. They've been conditioning people for a long time. And this is the type of collectivism, or the hive mind, which is, it's a synthetic union. It's a totally synthetic union. And what it does is it reinforces behaviors. It's behavior modification is what it is. It's total behavior modification. And it does not allow the individual theoretically to arrive at their own decision-making process. Most people, even though they think they're individuals, aren't even really individuals too. I mean, let's get clear on that. How many times have you ran across somebody who, you know, they thought was a real individual, and you got down and you really talked to them and you found out that a lot of their thoughts weren't their own, a lot of their feelings weren't their own, a lot of their belief systems weren't their own. It happens all the time. You know, we all go through it. You know, part of what I have to do is I have to run my own Norton, you know, my Norton virus scan to find out what, you know, what my programs are, and to look at them to see whether or not they fit or not. You know, today on Facebook, I got on somebody, and it was a knee-jerk reaction on my part. And I put my thing up about Rush Limbaugh, and it was this thing on Rush Limbaugh and Howard Stern, which I'll talk about. And and this guy, you know, kind of went after, you know, didn't even go after me, put his thing out there. I didn't know who he was. He's just a new friend. I was like, you know, who are you? I don't know you. You know, before when I was on Facebook, I would let anybody just post on my threads, and I'd be really patient, blah blah blah. And you know, I'm over that. And I'm not ashamed to say that I'm over that. But I was a little quick on him. You know, and he's probably an okay guy, but you know, I wanted him to, who are you? Where do I know you from? If I'd waited about 5 more minutes, he could have, you know, probably would have told me. But he got pissed off at me, and he decided he didn't want to be my friend. And maybe that's okay, maybe it's not. I don't know. It is what it is. Somebody else had recommended him, and I liked that person. So, you know, what was my program around? My program was I was trigger happy. You know? I was trigger happy. It's like, okay, well, how do I deal with that? Well, I guess I have my own talk show and get it out of my system. So anyway, you know, the whole idea around being an individual is tricky, but it's important. I think it's really important because it all starts from the individual. Now, a lot of people don't think that, right? So the collectivist movement, to me, is an outside-in experience. The collectivist movement will determine your behavior and will modify your behavior so you internalize it. The individual, theoretically, would determine their own values, would determine their own morals and characteristics, and then would, at that point, begin to share them with the world around them. And if they're balanced and if they're individuated, and all of a sudden you got a bunch of healthy individuals running around creating a collectivist movement, right? I mean, I think that's, on paper, that's the way it can go. I mean, I think of it as like cells in a body. You have healthy cells in a healthy body, then you've got healthy cells or a healthy body. You got a healthy immune system, and the individual is the cell. It is a vital part of the collective immune system. And if you have a bunch of unhealthy individuals, well, what are you going to need? You're going to need, you know, outside intervention. You're going to need prescription legislation or prescription behavior modification in order to alter the sick individual. Now there's something to be fixed. It's that Hegelian dialectic, right? Problem, solution, you know. Problem, solution. Create the problem and create the solution. But a healthy individual can begin to say, okay, I want to form an alliance here. I want to form an alliance here. No, I don't want to form an alliance here. And that goes on to any level of relationship, whether it's the individual relationship, whether it's a love relationship, whether it's a community. That's what you have the ability to do. You can say yes or you can say no. And saying no is important sometimes. In fact, it's vital. I used to be a big yes guy. I'm more of a no guy now. I still like yes, trust me. I got Jupiter in the first house in Sagittarius. Yes is great. But no has become much more important. It's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want that. No, I don't want this person in my life. No, I don't want that type of relationship. discernment and discrimination. And it begins with the individual. And then but the challenge to the collectivist or the collectivist mindset is when the individual makes those discernments, they can say, this is not right. It doesn't feel right. No. Now, is my choice going to impact, or is my thought going to negatively impact others? No, not really. They can still go live their lives. I'm just choosing not to live this way. Or I'm choosing not to embrace this as my belief system. I got a real kick out of, God, it's like, okay. I said this on Twitter, and nobody really commented on it, because they probably weren't sure how to take it, but homophobia is the new anti-Semitism. You go after somebody who is gay, or you say something that is critical, controversial around gay people or gay culture, get ready to have your palms and your souls crucified, because that's where it is. Gay culture and gay lifestyles, they are the sacred cow now. You cannot offer a differing opinion without being accused of being hateful. There's the old hate card. You're hateful. You're ignorant. You're backwards. So here's what happened. Kirk Cameron. If you don't know who Kirk Cameron is, he was a star on, what was that show? I don't know, some family show. Anyway, he was on this show, Kirk Cameron, famous show in the 80s. And he became, maybe he was already a born-again Christian. I don't know. But he certainly became one. That's what he became known for. And his big post-TV film was for the initial edition of Left Behind. And Left Behind is kind of a born-again Christian supernatural thriller where the rapture happens, and it was written by Tim LaHaye, and the rapture happens, and I believe Kirk Cameron is left behind. It's a scare tactic. It's like, you better get right with Jesus, you better do the right thing, you better listen to what God says, you better listen to what your pastor says. And there's a whole, prescription behavior that falls out of that. And if you follow people like Tim LaHaye or John Hagee, it's all about dispensationalist, end times Christian theology, which is rah, rah, rah for the rapture and revelation. And they have a very special relationship with Israel as a result of this, because Israel has to remain intact. There can be no two-state solution. So the Christian Zionists are very, very big in Israel. In fact, I talked to Less Visible about this, that John Hagee actually has a gymnasium named after him in Dimona, where they have the nuclear power plant in Israel, because of his work with the Israelis and the Christian Zionists, who send a lot of money to Israel from their coffers. So this is the brand of Christianity that Kirk Cameron is in. I'm not into it for many reasons, most of which is I don't dig the end times theology. To me, it's the worst case scenario of Christianity. And they say, well, you can't have Christianity without the end time scenario. I don't believe that. Or I don't believe that version of it. Anyway, Kirk Cameron came out and said something about homosexuals, about gays. And now he's a lightning rod. And people are going after Kirk Cameron. What do you expect? He's a born-again Christian. He reads the Bible. There's a big chunk in there about Sodom and Gomorrah. What do you expect? I mean, this is like the weekend of low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, but they're going after, they went after Kirk Cameron. People are going after Kirk Cameron and Rush Limbaugh. I don't think these things are accidents, by the way. And I'll bet you Kirk Cameron has said a dozen other things about gay or gay culture, none of which got picked up on at any given time in the media. However, whatever he said this time, well, it's out there now, and he's a lightning rod for it. I'll tell you one thing, Kirk Cameron doesn't care what you think. He's in a different world. he's in a different community. Rush Limbaugh may care because it's tied to his money. Now Kirk Cameron will actually be a hero in his world. I mean, he just earned big, big salvation points because now he's being persecuted, just like Jesus was. He doesn't care about what people think, really, at least not in that level, not in that world. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. So here's what we are. We're going through this time. And I'm going to play a clip from Andrew Breitbart, who passed away. And then after this clip, I'm going to talk a little more. I'm going to play some music. I'm going to jump into the chat room. I'm going to come out in the second hour. I'm going to open the phones. And one of the things that I would love to talk about tonight is freedom of speech, the freedom of being an individual. You know, what that entails, where the limits are. Are there limits? You know, are we living with a diluted sense of what an individual is? Is it Luciferian? Are we really dealing with a Luciferic model of individuality? And I'm going to talk about that when we come back from the music, and I'll come back. I'll play the music after I play this video. Let me see if I can find this video here. It's right here. This is what Andrew Breitbart said, and I don't agree with everything Breitbart held politically, but I agree with what you're about to hear, and I agree with it 100%. And this is why I think his life and his death was very important and should not be forgotten. Okay, so this is Andrew Breitbart about his legacy. Here we go.
What I want to be known as the guy who was awakened from a sleepwalking liberalism by a man by the name of Clarence Thomas, who stood there in a dignified manner as they tried to destroy him, yet he wasn't destroyed. And I want the Democratic Party and liberalism, I want my professors at Tulane and the humanities departments to know that they tried to brainwash me to side with liberal Democrats in order to attack those that disagree. And I want my legacy to be that they know that they screwed with the wrong guy. In the United States of America, you have the right to think freely. You have the right to do whatever you want in this United States. And the idea that the Democrat media complex would tell you that you are a slave to an ideology, to a mindset, that if you don't abide by it, we're going to punish you severely. That's as un-American as anything that I can possibly imagine. I don't care if you would agree with me or disagree with me on policy. What I care about is that you have the freedom in this country to live your life as a free, rugged individualist. And I am at war with anybody that would tell you that you don't have a right to be a free man.
Andrew Breitbart, thank you, man, for being here with me today.
Thank you.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I'm gonna take it even out from being somebody that belongs to the United States of America. You know, he talks about this as an American principle, American ideology. Yeah, it is, but it's something the entire planet needs. I mean, think about, you know, somebody that's living in Libya right now under the iron fist of Al Qaeda. You think they can be an individual right now? Hell no. Absolutely not. So it's not just an American thing, it's a planetary thing. It's a human thing. And I think Andrew Breitbart, if there's anything you can distill from his life, it's that interview. It's that piece. And I don't agree with Clarence Thomas. I don't agree with a lot of his conservative rhetoric. But there are some that I do. And I think what Breitbart stood for was he was Aquarius, and he was a really good Aquarius. Trust me. He was a pretty good shit disturber. What he stood for was hypocrisy, or the defense against, or the offensive thrust against hypocrisy. That's what he stood for. And he saw it clearly time and time and time again, I believe. And that's what changed, I think, and altered his ideology. I think it's important. I think the video is important. And I think it's important to us to be able to anchor that to the best that we can in our own lives. And look, Breitbart was even very, very supportive of gay culture. I mean, he fought tooth and nail to allow. First of all, he was on an advisory board for what was it? It was like Go Proud, GOP Proud. He was on their advisory board. They have this conservative convention every year, and he threw a party for a group called the HomoCons. This is a guy who he believed in freedom for everybody. He was totally Aquarian that way. And so people say, "Oh, he was hateful." He wasn't hateful. He was out to disassemble hypocrisy. He would have been a very interesting person to watch as time went on. Taken from us too soon, and in my estimation, clearly a hit. Clearly a hit. All right, speaking of hits, I'm going to play you a piece by a man called Clay, who's from San Diego, or that part of the world. And this is, he put this up last night on YouTube, on SoundCloud, Facebook on SoundCloud. And it's actual samples from the Philadelphia experiment. And it's a pretty cool piece. It's kind of upbeat. It's got kind of a military vibe to it. Upbeat military, but it's also kind of surreal. Anyway, it's 7 minutes and 28 seconds of interesting samples and beats. I'm going to hang out in the chat room for a while. When I come back, I'm going to open the phones. If you want to talk, come in, call in, agree with me, tell me I'm full of shit, whatever you want to do. We'll open it up, and if I don't get any phone calls, then I'll talk some more, and then I'll shut it down for the first time and be back tomorrow. So here's a man called Clay. I'll be back in 7 minutes and 28 seconds.
They fired this thing up. They fired this thing up. They fired this thing up. You got astronomical amounts of energy. You got astronomical amounts of energy. They fired this thing up. 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 You got astronomical amounts of energy. You got astronomical amounts of energy. They fired this thing up. You got astronomical amounts of energy. They fired this thing up. They fired this thing up. You got astronomical amounts of energy. You got astronomical amounts of energy. They fired this thing up. They fired this thing up. They fired this thing up. You got astronomical amounts of energy. thing up. You got astronomical amounts of energy. You got astronomical amounts of energy. They fire this thing up.
Wow. Full speed ahead. That was a man called Clay. I'm in the chat room, and he's in there right now. Clay, what's the name of that tune again? Can you just type that into the chat box there? What is the name of that? I know it's B2000 something B2000. Let me see how. Let's see, B2000. Charlie Frith. By the way, the world famous Charles Frith is in the chat room tonight, all the way from Thailand. Give it up for Charlie. He wants to know what Chiron is. He wants to know what Chiron is. Full Speed Ahead. That's the name of the track. Full Speed Ahead. Okay, let's get Full Speed Ahead back into the show. And there's somebody already waiting to talk. 619. Let's find out who they are and what they want to talk about. Hello, Charlie. Wants to know what Chiron is. Turn your radio down. Turn the computer down. Full speed ahead. You're on the air. Okay. Full speed ahead back into the show.
Hello?
Yeah, hey, who's this?
Hey, are we on? I thought I hung up the phone. This is Clay.
Hey, Clay. How's it going, man?
Good. Is this Robert?
It is. Can you turn your speakers down just a tad?
Okay, I'm way out in the outside of the room. Let me turn.
All right.
Wow. Okay.
Good pickup on that
mic. Let me turn this down. No, it's a pleasure to hear my music on your station and to see all these people in your room and having this great conversation. And I'm glad to be here.
Well, good, man. It's a good crew in there. We're a lot of really turned on and articulate and loving people. So thanks for calling.
And one of my big things is I've never been into talk radio because I just love thought. I love discussion, and I've always felt so removed from it, and yet I've always been very drawn to, your discussions. And so here I am, just on board and in the chat room, and it's really great because I'm doing art on the side as I'm listening to you, working on a current video of a car wash experience, and it's quite crazy. But I don't want to interrupt the flow of what you guys are discussing. I'm maybe even have a thought or two, and I'm just glad to be here.
Well, thanks, man.
Thanks for doing this, Robert.
What's that?
And thanks for doing this and keeping, these enlightened people engaged and giving them a forum to discuss this stuff, whether it's Occupy or Breitbart or, whatever the case may be. It's all good stuff. It's just dangling out there, and it's free form. What is it? Just kind of,
it's thank you, and I think it's important. We live in really important times, and I was thinking about this today. It was like, there are these periods in history where there are these peaks and valleys, and whenever mankind or humanity gets too close to like stepping over to the next level, something invariably happens and knocks it back a couple of centuries, or
it's a pendulum, and it's a cyclical, and it's kind of conical. And the thing that I have to emphasize that has also drawn me here is my love of astrology, which I've been doing for like 17 years, and I've always liked to try to incorporate, our astrology into how it affects us as individuals and as a collective. And I think you're doing that to, a very, evolved level, and I just really appreciate. And personally, there's a part of me that just feels very compelled to sit back and listen and absorb and learn. And if there's stuff I can share, and if that happens to be music, then I'm very honored to be able to do so. But I'm going to give the show back to you because it is your show, and it looks like you have a lot of people saying some really nice things on there.
So are you listening on your phone, Clay, or are you listening on your computer?
I was listening on the computer, and I actually have quite a spiffy new iMac. I'm not a fan of Apple Corporation at all, but they do make the best computers, and I am an Apple driver, and I was forced into this purchase just because they've kind of railroaded all the other corporations into not supporting some of the software that I rely on. And I will tell you that your show sounds really great from here. It's very clear, and it's a very reliable system, so I think it's a good basis to judge things. And So yeah, it looks good, and the flow is good. It's not clogging. There's not a lot of stream blocking, whatever you want to call that, buffering.
Buffering.
And,
I think the technical term for it is latency.
Yeah. Okay. But you have a good flow. There's been no halt in the dialogue in your monologue, and I finally figured out how to register and get into the chat room just in time. And so yeah, I think you have people complaining that they want you back in the room.
All right. Well, listen, I'll leap off here. So I'm gonna hang up, and you keep your reel down in the CV, okay?
I'll stay in touch, and I look forward to talking to you again, Robert. Thank you very much.
All right, Clay. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, that was the guy that made the music you just heard, man, Paul Clay, all the way from the CV. You know what the CV is? Chula Vista, California. I used to live in San Diego. Came very close to buying a tract home in Chula Vista, by the way. Very, very close. It was a nice tract home. But God, the whole thing, man, having a kid and buying a tract home, it was just, I talk about just shattering my programming. Wow. It was hard. Very hard. Very hard. Anyway, we're talking about Occupy Wall Street in the chat room. And so, all right, my take, Occupy Wall Street, there are layers of leadership. It's not this free-form, non-aligned kind of thing. When I first got there, I was talking about I should actually play some of the Occupy stuff again. I did some interviews there. And when I first got there, it was very early on in the experience. And anytime you're like at an early stage of any event, there's a lot of energy. A lot of it is like really happening energy. It's like, wow, this is happening. There's like I would have likened it to kind of like when poetry went from iambic pentameter to free verse. It was a free verse moment. It had kind of a very 1960s feel, and I'm down in the 60s a little bit, but by and large, there were some good vibes in the 60s. So there was that feel. There was drummers. Felt like this is interesting. I don't know where it's going. I don't know who's behind it. It was very new, but it felt like the energy was like, yeah, there's something happening here. Something is happening. And then I went back. It was on a Wednesday night. I think it was on the 24th of September. 24th of September, and I went back on the 27th. And the energy was really different. And that was on a Saturday. So the 24th was on a Wednesday, I believe. 27th was on a Saturday. It was darker, and it was more militant. It had a militant vibe. And that's when they marched across the Brooklyn Bridge. And that's when all these people got arrested. What's really interesting is that guy, Dallas Goldbug, has all these crazy videos about people that are like doubles and actors. And clearly, there's some very dubious characters that are being arrested who show up in other parts of Occupy Wall Street in different personalities. What was really interesting is during the first, actually it was on the Saturday, literally you could walk around and like look at guys, like men with baseball caps and glasses go, undercover, undercover, undercover. It was kind of obvious. But they were slick, they were sophisticated. There was an organizing principle behind Occupy Wall Street, no matter what people say or pretend, there was an organizing principle behind it. And my take, if you want my take around it, I believe that Occupy Wall Street, and I have no evidence based on this, but I believe that the White House was ultimately behind Occupy Wall Street. That's my take. That's my take. It's a back pocket thing. And certainly George Soros is behind Occupy Wall Street. He's funded Adbusters through the Tides Foundation, which is out here in San Francisco. But Soros also funded some of the other revolutions. He certainly was behind who was Ceausescu, Romania. He was behind the Romanian Revolution for sure. Absolutely. So anyway, so you got the Soros link, and I think ultimately you could probably trace OWS back to the White House. It's coming up again. The American spring is coming as soon as the weather changes. I think the concept of Occupy is great. I like Occupy Monsanto. I think that's great. I love it. Fantastic. Go Occupy Monsanto. Go Occupy Disneyland. I think Disneyland needs to be occupied. That's what I think. Go Occupy Area 51. Now, these are I think the hot spots of occupation. If you're going to go occupy, what else should they occupy? Go occupy the UN. I don't think the UN is benevolent at all. Go occupy them. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why you want to occupy the UN. You want to occupy the UN because the UN determines the growth of hemp and certainly the proliferation of medicinal marijuana. The UN is very strict about marijuana, and you can't grow in certain countries unless the UN says so. So go occupy the UN. A lot of people are very pro-medicinal marijuana, pro-hemp. Go occupy the UN. It's a good place to occupy. There are other places to occupy besides Wall Street or besides the Oakland Civic Center. What are you ultimately trying to do here? You know, I think occupying Jamie Dimon's house, that was really interesting. Or Lloyd Blankfein, those were interesting places to occupy. Absolutely. So I'm not opposed to occupy. Maybe just change it up a little bit. But they were not receptive at all to the Ron Paul stuff. No. See, they believe that Ron Paul will just give corporations carte blanche. And Ron Paul will not, well, he will give them a lot more freedom than their corporations have a hell of a lot of freedom now. It's hard to believe that Ron Paul will give them any more. He would give them a 15% tax break, but now so would Barack Obama. What the Occupy people want is they want more government protection against big business, against big pharma. They want bigger government to that end. Maybe they should go occupy some land somewhere. Ted Turner's got like 2 million acres or something like that in North Dakota. Go occupy some of that. That'd be interesting. Hard to get to, though. But it's going to get cooked up, and I do believe, and George Soros has even said it himself. Why? Because he probably knows that Occupy is going to be violent this spring. I have no doubt that it'll probably be violent. It was already getting violent in Oakland. Oakland's a lousy place to have Occupy because there's a lot of street thugs in Oakland. There was a lot of crime that was taking place in Occupy Oakland, which is just what the powers that be want. They want riots. That's absolutely what they want. They want that. They want crackheads. They want to bring out all their new toys that they bought with all those Department of Homeland Security dollars. That's what they want. They're egging for a fight. They're poking that stick. There's a better way. We have to find a better way. If we want to change things, we got to find a better way. And part of it is not being reactionary. I contend to this day that if we wanted to change the world, we want to change the country, we just have to stay home for 60 days. Get 65% of the population to stay home and do nothing for 60 days. Well, not do nothing. Maybe read. Maybe talk to your neighbors. Maybe build a shed. But just stop it. Stop it all. Stock up for 60 days worth of supplies, food, fill your tank up with gas, but don't go anywhere, and just shut it down. That's all people have to do. They don't have to go out anywhere. Just stay home. You want to change the world, just stay home. Do nothing. It's not reactionary. You're not going out protesting. Hey, I'm going to stay home. We're taking a couple months off here. We're all stocked up, and we got about, got another 100 million people that are taking 2 months off with us at the same time. That's the way it is. Maybe we'll come back to it. Maybe we won't. There's a movie called B Movie, not to be confused with B Film, or the B in which took place in World Trade Center Tower, I believe. That wasn't 7. It was World Trade Center Tower number 1. If you know what I'm talking about, you can find out. It was a group of art students doing an art project in one of the towers in the lead up to the 9/11. But I'm talking about B movie, and the B movie. God, it's an insidious film. I saw it with my kid. Theoretically, it's a kid's movie. It was written by Jerry Seinfeld, one of his buddies. The whole concept of B movie, which is loosely based in some ways on The Graduate, is there is this Barry B. Benson. And he graduates from B college, and he really doesn't want to do anything. And here he's like Benjamin Bratton from is his name Benjamin Bratton or Benjamin Bradford from The Graduate. And it's the same deal. There's even a scene where he goes, like in The Graduate, he goes underwater. Some guy's talking about plastics, and he goes underwater, and the pool drowns him out. This very same scene in B movie, except the water is just pure honey. So anyway, this guy Barry decides he doesn't want to get a job and doesn't want to do the normal B things. So what he does is he splits, and he hangs out with humans. He finds this human woman that is played by Renee Zellweger, and how do I talk about this film in ways that may actually poke some culturally sensitive buttons? Okay, I'm just going to go. So it's clear that the bees are Jewish. It's clear the bees are all Jewish, very Jewish. There's all kinds of little Jewish jokes. I'm not making anything up here. I'm not painting it with this broad stroke brush. That they're bad bees. I'm not being, anti-bee. But he winds up with this human, played by Renee Zellweger in the cartoon, and her boyfriend, who is, dyed in the wool, Harvard Republican, and he steals, literally the bee steals Renee Zellweger's attention, her character, away from this guy. He does not like this bee. He makes fun of this bee who is clearly a Gentile human, right? Because it's very insidious, this movie. I'm not going into any hateful place. I'm just telling you about the film, and you can read reviews of the film, and you'll find exactly what I'm talking about. What happens is that all of a sudden, Barry believes that the bees are being mistreated, that they're slaves. And so what he does is he leads a revolt. He has all the bees stop making honey. And he brings the world to its knees. He brings the entire world to its knees. Stops everything. Stops plant production, everything. Just because they didn't want to play and participate in the game anymore. So then eventually what happens is that they realize the error of their ways, and there's a big climatic scene, and the bees save humanity. Now the bees save humanity. So what do we have here? It's the Hegelian dialectic, right? It's a Hegelian dialectic. And they come in and they save humanity. And everybody lives happily ever, kumbaya. But the reason I brought it up is because of what the bees did. The bees just said no. And it brought everything to a grinding halt. Anyway, it'll never happen. Or it may happen, I don't know. But I'm not going to be out in front of it. But if people really wanted to change things, they wouldn't do anything. They'd just stay home. And they'd say, give us a call. Give us a call when you want us back. But when we come back, things are going to be a little different. Think about that. That'd be huge. Huge. But there's other ways that I think we can change this thing if we want to. Lately, I've really gotten into hemp, not as a product or as a smokable thing, but as a really viable solution to where we are. I think hemp is the silver bullet. And I talked about it before, and I'll stop wasting your time. But hemp is the silver bullet. Hemp could save not only the U.S. economy but the world economy. And you marry it with edible medicinal food grade marijuana that you juice, which is extremely high in phytonutrients. You've got a supreme 1-2 punch that would change the world around us dramatically and overnight. People could grow their own hemp. You can do textiles. You can do fuel. There's all solvents, varnishes, foods, you name it, all from hemp. And anybody could grow it. Anybody. The Kentucky farmers are being taxed out of existence. These are the tobacco farmers. Kentucky, South Carolina, Virginia, which is where they grow the tobacco, West Virginia, Mississippi. They're being taxed out of their livelihood, and they need something else to survive and to be sustainable. And hemp would be a great transition crop, and they can't grow it. Nobody can grow hemp here. You can grow it in Canada. You can grow it all over South America, but you cannot grow industrial-grade hemp here. And it's because, really, it is the magic bullet. It is the magic bullet. I wonder if Ron Paul would allow the growing of hemp. He might. Okay, it is 8:30, and I've talked for mostly an hour and a half. I'm going to give you the opportunity to call in. 347-308-8995, 347-308-8995. If you want to talk about Occupy Wall Street, you want to talk about Rush Limbaugh, and how if you agree with him, if you don't agree with him, if you think he's a jerk, if you think that this is all part of a divide and conquer game, that he's controlled opposition, maybe he's doing this sort of on his own, or maybe he's getting marching orders. You want to talk about that? You want to talk about freedom of speech, being able to say what you want to say, share what you want to share? 347-308-8995. When I was drinking, I was a lot more. I was angrier when I used to drink. That's because my liver was taxed all the time. So, but every now and then, man, I can rev it up a little bit. I still have a little bit of that in me, but it's different now. It's a different. It's a different assemblage point now. But but I can still get fired up. And so last night I was on Twitter, and one of the most popular tweets was Lindsay Lohan. Apparently, Lindsay Lohan hosted Saturday Night Live and was terrible. That she couldn't remember her lines, and people were making fun of her. Well, people don't understand that Lindsay Lohan is a beta. She's a beta slave, MK Ultra beta slave, whose programming is just falling apart. I actually feel for Lindsay Lohan in a very big way. And just take a look at her sister. See what's going on with her sister. Same deal. Sisters had a complete identity change. They fall into the MPD categories. So she was on there last night, and people were making fun of her, and you don't understand what goes on with these girls in order to get them to be as supplicated and pliant and implantable as they need to be. So I was watching all these comments about Lindsay Lohan, and one of the guys that was commenting a lot was this guy Torre. Torre, he used to be on MTV, works at Rolling Stone. He's like this young, hip. He's a novelist. He's articulate. He's a cool guy. He's a really cool guy. And he dissed Andrew Breitbart, and I noted that. I took a note of that. And he's a very politically correct, cool guy. And he said something to the effect that whoever thought having Lindsay Lohan on was a bad idea. He wasn't really making fun of her, but he was definitely commenting on it. So I'm not friends with him, but I sent him. I said, the reason why, I tweeted to him personally, or replied to him, the reason why Lindsay Lohan is an MK beta. And you should go to this site and begin your deprogramming. And the link I sent him to was In Search of Black Assassins. I don't know if you've seen that site, but if you haven't, go there. It is one of the most mind-blowing sites on the internet. It's this guy who lives in Oakland, and his whole thing is about breaking down the programming and mind control within the black community. And it's brilliant. I mean, he's absolutely, utterly brilliant. And so I sent that link to Torre. I wonder if he'll go there and check it out. And if he does check it out, I wonder how it'll affect him. Because it's a very different mindset than the kind of the hip, postmodern, New York, living in Brooklyn, one world flavor vibe. Very dark and very occult and very conspiratorial. So I sent that his way. And I did it because I like to disturb shit every now and then. Okay, it's 8:30. I'm going to give you 5 more minutes, 5 solid minutes to call in and say something, anything. And if not, that's fine. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I have this clip on Agenda 21. It's been a while since I played this. I'm going to play this, and it's, I believe it's kind of an outline of Agenda 21. And I talked about it a little bit earlier, and this was in regards to industrialized hemp and the growing of industrialized hemp. So this is about 9 minutes, and let's see where this goes. This is a clip on Agenda 21. I believe this was a presentation that was given to people in Santa Cruz. This should be your primer on Agenda 21. So let's play this, and if you want to call in and talk about this or anything else afterwards, that's cool. And if not, then I'll just wind it down, and I'll come back tomorrow and do it again, hopefully with something fresh to add. Here we go. This is on Agenda 21.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunities.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock.
And the family unit. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This was back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
The United States government's support for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there, where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4. But what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them and pack them units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high rises with federal dollars. In fact, Santa Cruz has received a $300 million federal grant to build the first 3,000 of these stack and pack them units. The County Board of Supervisors has said, if you are a sustainable developer, you're immune from any construction defect liability. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The Smart Growth Program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
The question has been asked many times how the people who are perpetrating these things expect to do this and make it last. And the answer to that is that you steal a generation of children and you indoctrinate them so that they accept these ideas and they become global citizens in the coming global village.
UNESCO came out and declared 2005 to 2015 the decade of education for sustainable development. But they go on to say that it will encompass the 40 chapters of Agenda 21. That is your federal national curriculum. The entire purpose of second grade social studies is to transfer loyalty from the family to the government and teach them about sustainable economic consumption. Students construct their own understandings of reality and realize that objective reality is not knowable. So why bother? The truth is, the truth, which keeps men free, is being suppressed in order to prop up the attitude training agenda. And it moves on. This is our new math called connected mathematics. Standard 3 tells us that students learn that mathematics is man-made, that it is arbitrary, and good solutions are arrived at by consensus. Most of us assume 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. You're wrong. We might reach a new consensus. How well does it work? Well, they tell you in the teacher's guide in the back, it tells us that because the curriculum doesn't emphasize arithmetic computations done by hand, some students may not do as well on tests assessing computational skills. We believe such a trade-off in the favor of CMP is very much to the student's advantage in the world of work. Our children are mathematically illiterate on purpose. How do I know on purpose? Why isn't this just a basic bad idea? Because the Sustainable Development Plan tells us so. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. Charlotte Iserby, I owe you an apology. I did not believe for the longest time it was a deliberate dumbing down. I thought the dumbing down was a natural consequence of a bad idea. Folks, it's deliberate. It's deliberate.
The sustainable globalist goal is the orchestration of a planned fall of American principles, values, and lifestyles. The effect on the average American will be devastating. With modernizing technology, the ordinary person will live without independence, privacy, or substantive rights.
Another press conference that I attended was the ICLE group, the International Committee for Local Environmental Initiatives. It helps in the implementation of Agenda 21 in all of our local communities. And one of the speakers was Harvey Rubin, who happens to be the vice chair of ICLE. And I asked him about the correlative rights that Americans derive from the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that, of course, is your individual liberties, your private property, your freedom of speech. Asked about it clashing with Agenda 21. And you know what his response was? Individual rights must take a back seat to the collective.
Well, I wish they had done that little Borg sample there at the end. She said individual rights take a backseat to the collective, which is kind of where we started off tonight, the individual versus the collective. And Agenda 21 is all about the formation and the creation of the collective. And part of the creation of the collective isn't just about acreage or where you live or land rights. It's also the real estate of your consciousness and your mind. That is a big part of it. And they were talking about how schools are actually playing a role in the indoctrination and reorientation of their mindset. And I have a kid who's in second grade, and he does not get your standard report card. He gets a report card that basically says he's doing well enough, meeting the standards for whatever that activity is and his grade. No more A, B, C, D, no more A, B, C, D, F. Sorry. This is very soft, fuzzy kind of, pass along. And last year he had 2 parent-teacher conferences. So we sat down and we got to talk to the teacher, and she told us, where he was strong, where he was weak. This year we only get 1. We got this little thing that basically said, he's doing well enough that we don't have to go in. They're going to send him his report card in the mail at the end of school. It's almost like achievement is arbitrary now. And I can see that. I can clearly see that. And every now and then he'll bring stuff home, and we'll talk about things. I was like, what? Why are you learning about that? It's interesting. So I can tell you unequivocally that it is happening at a grade school level, and I'm seeing it with my kid. Now, I just read something that apparently Mississippi just repealed Agenda 21. Let me see if I can find this. So anti-Agenda 21 legislation was filed in Mississippi, and this is from this year. This is an act relative to the Agenda 21 Rio Declaration of Environment and Development and the Statement of Principles for the Sustainable Management of Forests. This is be it enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Mississippi. As used in this act, political subdivision means all state, county, incorporated city, unincorporated city, public, local entity, public-private partnership, or any other public entity thereof. Neither the state of Mississippi nor any political subdivisions shall adopt or implement policy recommendations that deliberately or inadvertently infringe upon or restrict private property rights without due process, as may be required by policy recommendations originating in or traceable to Agenda 21, a 40-chapter document that contains policy recommendations set to achieve sustainable development adopted by the United Nations in 1992 at the UN Conference on Environment Development, or any other international law or ancillary plan of action that contravenes the United States Constitution or the Mississippi State Constitution. So right there, Section 2, they basically said Agenda 21 doesn't apply here. So Section 4, this act shall take effect upon becoming law, the public welfare requiring it. So this is going to be interesting. Here's a state that has pushed back on Agenda 21. Now, did they push back on Agenda 21 because some corporation wanted those lands? I mean, you know, you have to figure this out, right? This is kind of this is the tug of war we're engaged in, right? It's the corporations versus the collectives at some level now. I mean, did they really think about the rights of the people in the state of Mississippi? And if they did, God bless them. That's good. That doesn't mean that they can just crap all over their land. They need to take care of it, theoretically. But they need to do it on their own terms. So, did you hear about this? Did Rush Limbaugh talk about this? I don't think so. Is this on the national news? I don't think so. You heard it here tonight. Mississippi pushed back. It's the poorest state in the union, but they still push back. Poor in assets, rich in character. That's Mississippi. They do have a very nice rest stop in Mississippi, though. Right as you enter the state, I hung out there one night. Okay, that's it. I think we've reached the end of the show. We pulled into the station. And I'm going to do this again tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. Next week, I promise we'll have guests. And we'll have interesting people, gripping people, riveting conversation. So come on back and listen. I promise. It will only get better. It will only get better. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discipline what's possible. I want to thank everybody that was in the chat room tonight. Gloria, Mustang Sally, Erica, Charles Frith, who I always want to call Charlie, but he doesn't call himself Charlie, he calls himself Charles. I'll respect that. Charles Frith, go to his blog, by the way, Punk Planning. Check him out. Lots of good stuff there. Follow him on Twitter. Dear friend Gloria O'Neill Savage. And our new friend, Man Called Clay, who we played his song tonight. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and the anonymous people that tuned in as well, listened in the chat room. And I'll be back tomorrow, and who knows what I'll talk about, but it'll be short and sweet, 1 hour tomorrow. And then we're back in the cycle, and we'll have guests next week. I'm going to try to get Ellis Taylor on, see if I can coax him out of his hibernation. Okay, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. This is Robert Phoenix, and you were listening to Far Sunday. I'll see you tomorrow.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.